This lecture will examine math curriculum through the perspective of a behavioral curriculum theorist. I will begin first with a general overview of math curriculum and then a review of the behavioral approach to curriculum. Mathematics has been a part of the American education system since the first schools of the colonial era. At that time, math curriculum consisted of basic arithmetic. Only students attending university and going into specialized fields studied math beyond basic skills. This practice persisted throughout the 19th century. As progressive views began to dominate in the 20th century, mathematical content decreased in the public schools. The prevailing voices in math education during this time, like William Kilpatrick, a student and successor of John Dewey, saw no practical value of teaching students algebra or geometry in high school. His views were validated by educational psychologists and sociologists with similar understandings. David Sneddon, the founder of educational sociology and a widely known professor at Teachers College, sums the general attitude towards math education at that time in his statement: algebra is a non-functional and nearly valueless subject for 90% of all boys and 99% of all girls, and no changes in method or content will change that. In the 1940s, the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics formed and began conducting studies and writing reports in hopes of having mathematicians and math teachers become a part of the conversation regarding math curriculum. It was even evident in the armed forces that math reform was needed because the Army had to provide arithmetic training so soldiers could learn to act as bookkeepers and gunmen. Shortly after, during the mid-1950s, the Russians launched Sputnik. This was a sure sign that American education would need critical mathematical curriculum reform. The major ideas from this period were new math programs in junior and senior high schools, and the introduction of calculus into the high school math curriculum. In the years since, improving student mathematical achievement has been vigorously pursued. Even today, we are currently undergoing math reform as many states have adopted the new Common Core math standards as part of their curriculum. The behavioral approach to curriculum is the oldest and most prominent curriculum perspective around. Emerging during the early 1900s, behaviorism was strongly influenced by the scientific methods of research, business and industry, and the idea of efficiency. The purpose of curriculum was thought to outline the important knowledge of each subject and then develop activities to train the learner and enhance their performance. Education was viewed as something you attain to prepare you for your adult life. Franklin Bobbitt is one of the most noted behavior theorists, and his guidelines for creating objectives are still valid today. Wyatt Charters, another noted behaviorist, viewed curriculum as analysis of definite operations. He also believed that objectives should be measurable and observable. He worked to develop a method for selecting objectives and for applying subject matters in student activities to analysis and verification. Because the behaviorist approach to curriculum is guided by scientific and technical principles, it is very easy to apply this perspective to math curriculum. The learning outcomes are evaluated in relation to the goals and objectives of the content area. Almost all of math components are able to be observed and measured easily. For example, it is very easy to determine if a student can count to 20 by ones or twos. It is also just as easy to assess if a student can solve an equation or graph a function. This, however, becomes less clear-cut when we consider what objectives should be mastered and at which level they should be mastered. Also, what determines mastery of a math skill is another consideration of math curriculum that frequently comes into debate. The sequential structure of mathematics and the scientific method blend together very naturally. As we transition to the Common Core math curriculum, the objectives that are to be met at each grade level are identified for grades K through 8. At the high school level, the objectives are categorized into themes because of the variety of math courses offered and the grade level of students that enroll in those courses. A man ahead of his time, Bobbitt created guidelines for selecting objectives. 1. Eliminate objectives that are impractical or cannot be accomplished through normal living. 2. Emphasize objectives that are needed for success in adult living. 3. Avoid objectives opposed by the community. 4. Involve community in selecting objectives. 5. Distinguish between objectives that are for all students and objectives that are only for a portion of the student population. 6. Sequencing objectives in such a way as to establish how far students should go each year in attaining them, or establishing criteria for achievement. Some of Bobbitt's guidelines seem to continue to be adhered to today. There is currently a big push to ensure that students are prepared with 21st century skills and ready to enter the workforce. Educators also attempt to stay away from topics that are considered too controversial and opposed by the community. However, I don't believe the community has involvement in selecting objectives. With the level of mathematics taught at particular grades, I don't think it would be feasible to seek input from citizens, most of whom are not trained or experienced to examine mathematical curriculum. Another principle that has been lost is the eliminating of objectives that are impractical. Many of the concepts taught in high school level mathematics courses are abstract concepts that simply aren't applicable to the average person's everyday life. Lastly, there is less and less distinction between objectives for math courses that are for all students and the objectives that are only for a select group of students. It can be argued that the reason for this is because there is not a fair and equitable way to determine which students would be placed in which groups. As was stated before, the structure of the math curriculum we currently use continues to be outlined in the objective format designed by the early behaviorists. I believe that this is the best way to identify what knowledge and math skills need to be taught and which level they should be taught. Yet, mathematics continues to be an area of low performance in the U.S., with achievement rates steadily declining with each new reform. There is, of course, no quick or simple solution to this problem. In order to turn this situation around, I believe that a combination of changes will have to be made, and I'm not so sure that they have to do with the curriculum. There should be more regulation on the implementation of the curriculum and deregulation on the assessing of the curriculum. The numerous assessments rarely accurately represent the basic understandings that a student should have from a math course. Speaking strictly for the state of North Carolina, there is a department for curriculum and a separate department for assessments. Changes can happen in curriculum that don't get passed down to assessment, and the result is a test that measures objectives not included in the curriculum for that course. Another area that would likely improve the mathematics achievement is more accountability in the elementary and middle grades. High schools bear most of the burden of the low-achieving students, but more often than not, the student was low-achieving before they reached high school. With the span of curriculum taught in high school math courses, it is almost impossible to teach a student what they missed in a previous grade and the current content in which they will be assessed. Finally, a less popular suggestion for improvement of the curriculum is to lessen the mathematics requirements for high school students. Currently, a North Carolina high school student needs 4 math credits to graduate from high school, whereas it used to be 3 credits just years ago. The requirements and objectives were raised even though the current level standards were not being met, contributing to the deficit students were suffering academically. The intent behind adding a math requirement was to prepare students for taking calculus in high school. But the truth is that while math curriculum is currently building towards calculus, most students will not need or use it past their high school careers. Only students that plan to study STEM-related fields should work toward this goal. A much more life-applicable goal would be statistics-related courses, which until the implementation of a Common Core was scarcely covered in the content of the math courses at any level.